Hi, welcome to Off Script. I'm Zach Lewis.
And I'm Dr. Draper.
Today on the show, it's a summer blowout, baby. We didn't mean to do 3 movies, but we totally did. We're talking about Transformers, Rise of the Beasts, Elemental, and The Flash. Andy, how did this happen? We never do 3 movies. Very rarely do we do 3 movies.
Well, it's summer. It's the summer of blockbusters. This is when a lot of big stuff is coming out. And it's the popular thing. Lots of people are doing it. I also had a significant other request to see Elemental, which so I got roped into seeing it, even though I didn't want to. So.
Same. It's fine, though. Hey, what better reason to go to the movies, right, than for date night? Like, Andy and I both had different experiences. We both went and saw Elemental. Not bad things to say about it, honestly. I think that Disney trailer might have done them dirty a little bit. But before we get to all those, we need to talk about the news. The first thing this week, regarding Netflix's password crackdown, bad news, it's working. God, I can't believe this. This bums me out. For anybody who's not wise to it, Andy, what is this Netflix password sharing thing that's been going on?
So in late May, Netflix rolled out their anti-password sharing measures, which said if you were outside of the household, you were going to either have to pay for additional users at a reduced rate, or those people were going to have to get their own subscription. And we all thought that this was a very unpopular move. People were very vocally against it. But I do remember saying, Netflix they're the ones that have the data, so maybe they know something we don't. And apparently that they do. They ended up having a net 25% gain in signups over the last few weeks in May. 73,000 a day signups between May 25th and 28th. So massive amount of signups, more than even during COVID when everyone was locked down and at home. So while this measure looked like it was going to be really unpopular, it actually worked.
I'm really disappointed in this. Being able to share passwords has formerly been a free service that's been a part of having a Netflix account, just like HBO or Amazon and any other. And Netflix has proven that we can now monetize that, which usually give it a couple months and see if the numbers level out or anything. But if it keeps going the way it's been going, everybody's going to do this, right? It won't be long till Warner Brothers has HBO cracking down on passwords. Amazon will do it. Maybe some of them will say, oh, if you get Peacock, you can share with everybody. We're cool with that. Some will go one way and some will go the other. But it's just another way to squeeze people for a service we already had. And it's a bummer. I don't like that we have to pay extra for passwords. I don't know, though. Apparently Netflix likes it. This is the way of the future, right, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, it worked. We all said, well, everyone will boycott, people will cancel. Yeah, I canceled. Well, apparently not enough people canceled. I mean, people did cancel, but the number of signups outweighed the number of cancellations. So overall, it was a success, and you better believe that the rest of the streaming services will probably jump on board.
Huge W for Netflix. Huge L for the rest of us. Keep it here on Off Script for more. I don't know. I hope the numbers go down. I hope they start losing subs and go, oh no, this doesn't work. But it seems like it is. Never put it past the average American content viewer to pay extra where they can. Our next story this week, Disney is moving their schedule around. Avatar 3 has been pushed back to 2025. They claim they've got 2 Star Wars movies coming for 2026. Marvel's getting pushed around. Andy, what's going on, right? Typically when Disney moves their schedule, it involves a lot of features because they've got a big schedule of films, but this seems quite large, at least worth reporting on.
Everything is getting moved, at least some. This is largely in part because of the writer's strike, because they're delaying production on several of the upcoming movies, specifically Captain America Brave New World and the Thunderbolts movie. Those have both been pushed about 6 months to late 2024. Those are kind of the big ones, but then there are some massive moves. Avatar 3 got pushed a year to Christmas 2025, but the fourth and fifth Avatar movies have now been pushed to 2029 and 2031, which is just absurd to me. Anything announced more than a year, you're really just playing a guessing game because so much can happen with production and delays and directors and talent drops out. So I mean, you trying to guess something 8 years in the future might as well be 80 years in the future. Who knows when that's going to come out?
Yeah.
Anything longer than Yeah, anything longer than a year is who knows.
Yeah, there's absolutely nothing certain in here. I did get a laugh. Somebody was interviewing Zoe Saldana when this news dropped, and they asked her, hey, it sounds like Avatar 5 just had its release date pushed back to 2031. What do you think about that? She said, cool, that movie will come out when I'm like 57. Great. It's such an insane run because of how long it takes those movies, like from shooting to do all the posts, do all the CGI. And it's funny just thinking about Avatar 3 because they actually have shot most of it. I think in that same interview, Saldana was explaining that they have about 70% of the movie done just because they shot 3 all right around when they shot 2. Cameron said it's because he didn't want the actors to age up much, even the ones who aren't doing CGI. You could think of like Spider, the live action kid, who is much older now and is in Scream 6 and looks like a completely different person. So I don't know how I guess there's going to be a big time jump between Avatar 3 and 4. Wild stuff happening over at Disney, and that's just one franchise. Blade is getting moved to 2025, which is insane because Blade was supposed to start shooting like last year, and it's still up in the air. They've got this untitled Alien movie they're talking about moving around. Star Wars is... who knows what's happening with Star Wars? Like, monumental moves from Disney, I guess. And it's nice to hear, in a small way, that all of that's a result of writers who just want a fair shake. Like, I don't think that's a bad thing, but... regardless of them trying to get around the writer's strike, like it seems like it's starting to creep up, you know? And I wonder if other studios are going to start to move things around too.
Well, this is exactly, what you want from a strike. You want it to hurt the business, and that's what these delays. And I mean, some of these are, years. The Avatar 5 was supposed to be in 2029, so that's already moved 2 years. I mean, that's not going to come out to 2040. Let's be real. The 2 big Avengers films, Avengers: The Kang Dynasty and Avengers: Secret Wars, have also been pushed a year. One of the big kind of head-scratching announcements was that there will be 2 Star Wars movies planned for 2025, or 2026, rather, May and December. But we never know because Star Wars projects are announced and canceled every other month, and it's crazy. And so many projects have been announced, talent has been attached, and then it completely falls apart. But the one that's closest is whatever this Daisy Ridley, where she's like 15 years older in Master Jedi, whatever. We'll see. We may never see another Star Wars film again. Disney is so scared to press go on a Star Wars movie.
Yeah, they have announced and subsequently quietly canceled more Star Wars movies than they've made at this point. Like, Disney is very good at saying, we're going to make a Star Wars movie with Patty Jenkins, director of Wonder Woman, or Damon Lindelof, writer of Lost, or David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, writers of Game of Thrones, or a trilogy with Rian Johnson. None of those things have happened. All of them have been canned. Nothing has moved forward. Taika Waititi is supposed to have a Star Wars movie in theaters this December, and he hasn't even written a thing yet. Like, it's so weird what they're doing with Star Wars. Nobody knows. It's all up in the air. But keep it here on Off Script for more from, monumental box office moves and more from that writer strike when we hear. So far, no changes. One more story this week. The Flash and Elemental are going to have a tough week at the box office. Despite making, $50-something million for The Flash? That is not enough to justify that movie coming out. It's a really expensive feature. Elemental has the same problem. What's going on, Andy? Our summer blockbusters getting iced out?
Yes, a lot of competition. I mean, you have last week's Transformers: Rise of the Beast. Before that, Spider-Man. I always said No Way Home. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. There's a whole lot of competition. But you got the newcomers coming in way under expectations. Like you said, The Flash came in at $55 million. They were hoping to get around 70, which is still really low because it had a $220 million production budget, which means it probably needs to make $500 million to be profitable or even break even. So there's no way it gets even close to that. They're saying it's opened weaker than Black Adam from last summer, which Black Adam was pretty weak as well. So it's not looking good for The Flash. Elemental, also the lowest opening for a Pixar film since the original Toy Story. Of course, that was 30 years ago, so way more money in $1995 than now. They're hoping that Elemental might have a little bit more legs on it because it had a very good critics reception and cinema score. So it'll have some staying power, but the newcomers are really getting hit this week.
Two different studios, two different films, two different problems. For The Flash, there's a number of reasons it couldn't be doing well. Number one, general superhero fatigue, right? And this is not a Marvel film. This is coming out of DC, who's not putting out movies nearly as often, is not as much of a general thought in the American film-going consensus. I think people are like, oh yeah, they made a Batman movie starring Robert Pattinson, and there was a Joker movie, but like they're a little disparate, right? Number two, you got the Ezra Miller problem. Ezra Miller has a number of legal issues that are being worked through. That's a whole ball of wax. We've covered it on the show in the past. Number three, and I think this is one nobody's talking about, but Andy's right. Spider-Verse came out like 2 weeks ago, and that was a rockin' comic book movie. That movie's awesome. We covered it on the show. We talked about this at the end. I think that movie directly impacted this movie's ticket sales because everybody turned out for that. I was hearing people talking about that the next week, like, oh yeah, my friend said that was awesome. I got to go see it. Like people kind of had that on their mind 14 days ago, and now The Flash is here. And it's like, I don't know. I think there's some crossover there. There's people just not coming out for it. For Disney and Pixar and Elemental, though, different ball of wax. Dude, they got to pick their spots better. Like Turning Red should have been in a theater, and Lightyear should not have been in a theater. And
yeah,
they're putting things on Disney Plus, and Pixar is becoming diluted with what they're doing over there, and Elemental has just not had a great showing of trailers, and I don't know. I think it just hasn't generated the buzz it needs to. I think it could be doing better had they put in the work, but they just seem to not.
Any other weekend, Elemental would have done really well. Put it out in August, September, like some of the weaker months, when it doesn't have as much competition. That being said, the Super Mario Brothers came out in, mid-March or April. But some other time of the year and not going up against a bunch of heavy-hitting blockbusters.
Yeah. I don't know what the next thing is for Pixar. We talked about this in the show last week. Disney laid off like 75 top execs from Pixar. They've still got about 1,200 animators over there, so like they're still working. In fact, in front of Elemental, there's a trailer for Elio, their next feature. So they're not going away or anything, but like, dude, Pixar's got to get good at making theatrical features again, and Disney has to get good at promoting them. As for DC and The Flash, they're pivoting. The Blue Beetle's next, and then it's all new Superman, right, that they're currently casting for. We'll cover that on the show whenever it gets filled in. Andy, any other thoughts on this before we jump into The Flash?
I'm ready.
Andy is going to be taking the summary on this one. Thank God, too, because it's complicated, and he's the comic master here. Andy, please take it away.
The Flash? So this is the very long-awaited feature film of The Flash, who was first introduced in Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, way back in 2015 or so. His character was first in that. He was also in Justice League and Zack Snyder's Justice League. And this project has been like 10 years in gestation. Like, it's changed hand, multiple directors. It was scrapped at one point. It was Ezra Miller helped to revive it. Finally got attached to be directed by Andy Muschietti. And it's finally here after like nearly 10 years. So our story is Barry Allen, the Flash. He is trying to get his father out of prison, who has been kind of framed for the murder of his mother. This is really like origin backstory stuff that we haven't really heard of until now. At one point, Barry realizes he can run so fast that he can run back in time, and that he thinks, I can change the past and I can save my mom's life. I can get my dad out of prison. Ben Affleck's Batman makes a brief appearance, says, no, don't do this. This is a terrible idea. You don't know what the consequences could be. He does it anyways. He manages to save his parents, but in the meantime, he corrupts the universe he's in, and kind of creates a universe without superheroes, and runs into his alternate self, runs into a new Batman that we've seen in the trailer, played by Michael Keaton, resuming the role over 30 years since 1989 when he originally played the Batman. Up is down, left is right. Everything is wrong with the universe, and they have to try and fix it and make things right. And Barry has to try and return to his past. And that's our setup. Zach, what do you think?
So I think a lot of people are skeptical about The Flash. I myself was skeptical about The Flash. You can go back and listen on this very show when we joked about Ezra Miller getting a scriptwriter for The Flash to try to get it off the ground because DC was shaky for the last couple years now, and this movie was not a sure thing. Of course, it finally gets made. There's a whole lot of controversy that comes on the other side of it, courtesy of Ezra. But now here we are. We have The Flash. And I think like it would be easy to say this movie's not going to be good. It'd be easy to say, hey, I don't want to support it from personal reasons. Like I totally get that. Respect. But on its surface, like on its face, I think The Flash is a good comic book movie. I don't think it's bad. I've been really surprised at some people saying it's like horrifically bad and oh my god, it's so terrible and the worst comic book film. And I've also been surprised at hearing people say it's the best comic book movie ever. It wasn't James Gunn, but it was, I forget who exactly said like this is the best superhero movie of all time.
David Zaslav said that.
Yeah, the CEO of Warner Discovery. Very convenient for him to say his new superhero feature is the best superhero feature ever. It's not. It's definitely got problems, but it's a surprisingly fun script. The time travel aspects of The Flash and how they work, combined with like a really bouncy screenplay, makes for a movie that moves really fast. No pun intended. For a 2.5 hour runtime, like you wouldn't know it. It's snappy. It works. There's lots of action. There's fun set pieces. Like solid comic book feature. Like I have few complaints about The Flash. Andy, what'd you think?
I thought it was a mixed bag. There are things that work about it, and there's, I think, a whole lot that doesn't. And this is coming from someone who, I'm a huge comic book fan. I read a lot of comics. I'm the target demographic for this, and I was more or less kind of disappointed. The second half of this, I think, is better than the first half. When Barry first goes back in time and runs into young Barry, it's basically Back to the Future with superheroes, except it's way less interesting. And there's this whole weird like Three Stooges slapstick comedy happening like the first hour, and it's frustrating because you know what the Flash does. The Flash is fast, and somehow you're having to retread an origin story, be like, well, Barry, these are your powers. This is, well, you can't just run. You need a suit, you know? And it's like you're somehow going backwards in this movie to kind of tell a bit of an origin story. And I thought that first hour was really dull. It gets a lot better when Batman shows up about halfway through Michael Keaton's Batman, and we eventually run into Supergirl. It gets a little bit more interesting, but it's got a lot of problems. And I think when you're depending so much on characters like Batman, like you have two Batman men in this movie and Supergirl, and it's like, is this even a Flash movie anymore? So there were things that worked and things that didn't.
Yeah, that was one of the things that was so surprising about the trailer for me. There hasn't been a proper Flash origin movie in the DC universe, so it's not really clear how this Flash got their powers, but he's been around. He was in Justice League, Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice maybe shows up. I don't know, some other one. And watching the trailer for this, yeah, it's like half a Flash trailer, but then it's like half from Michael Keaton's Batman. They got the Danny Elfman score. He says, "Let's get nuts," right? Like it's got all the trimmings of classic Batman. So the trailer is like split down the middle. On one half, it's a Flash trailer, and the other half, it's Batman. Batman's on the poster. Batman's in the teasers. Like Batman's all over the place. Additionally, a little bit of Superman mixed in there, right? With the introduction of Sasha Cale as not Superman, but like a multiverse alternate version of Superman, right? Functionally, our warrior from Krypton. All three of them get lots of screen time. They make it a big effort to be like, look at all these different properties we're bringing in for fun and celebrating like superhero stuff. And like it's hard to appreciate that because this is the studio that made Space Jam 2, like the most soulless marketing gimmick like attempts at features. Space Jam 2 more so than Space Jam 1. Watching this movie, like you can't like, it's fun to see these characters interact, sure, but you definitely like realize a lot of it is just like box office bait, right? Like just like whatever gets people in seats. We're gonna put Batman in there, and we're gonna have Superman in there. They've been doing this since Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, right? Don't give Batman a proper origin movie. Just jump right into the big fight. And And that's a bit of a thing here, but I should say one of the things that works really well is all of these like actors and actresses. Ezra Miller is good in this movie, like tragically good. If you wanted us to slam Ezra Miller, like I have bad news. Ezra Miller's fine in this movie. They play two different Barrys, two different Barry Allens. Interacting with one another. One's a little younger, one's a little older. One's like, cool, dude, great, like all thumbs up. The other one's like, I got to figure this thing out and get on top of this. This dynamic that Flash has that is most effectively seen in, I think, Spider-Man is Flash is strong when they're doing their superpower thing, but Flash is weak when they're a human, right? Barry's always running late. Barry's never on time to things, which is funny and comedic because Barry is the Flash, right? And can move very quickly. And it creates this like weird like tick of a person who's like nervous and like twitchy and has a big appetite, and like Flash ends up being like a very likable character. Like it's very well done. I know there's been lots of comics and TV series, so they've got a lot of room to draw on, but like the core conceit of Flash, Batman, Supergirl, all solid, all fun characters.
Yeah, once we get everyone kind of together, it's a more interesting movie. They all, like, Batman has a lot of personality, like Michael Keaton's. He kind of has this very smug Batman, which I like. Sasha Calle doesn't have enough to do in this movie. Tragically underutilized, but she's great. And she has a few really good lines that she delivers with like Shakespearean seriousness. It's really great stuff. To me, Barry Allen's the least interesting person in his own movie, and it's because they can't really decide what kind of character they want him to be. You know, he's kind of doing a little bit of mentorship because he's supposed to be older Barry, helping younger Barry, but he also, I don't know, he doesn't have enough of a defined personality, and that's what really in the movies, that's what our superheroes are really defined as. When you look at Marvel, when you think of Captain America or Iron Man or Thor, they all have very distinct personalities that you know outside of like their superhero abilities, and Barry's just sort of a wet blanket, and I don't know why they made him just like the butt of the joke, and he's just kind of like a walking moron. And it's like, I mean, they don't write him like that in the comics. Like he's on the level with everyone else. Like, I don't know. He's like a child, and they decided to do that with not just this movie, but all of the DCEU. And I don't know, just kind of a wet blanket. But the action scenes, I think, are where this really works kind of the best.
Yeah, the action in Flash is a lot of fun. It does come at the expense of some grating CGI. We should talk about that in a minute. But for what it's worth, in a 2.5 hour feature, like you've got to keep people interested, right? And you got to have good ebb and flow of like high intensity moments and then like low relaxing moments, so people can get up and get a popcorn refill or go to the bathroom or whatever, right? Like you can kind of breathe. And Flash does a really good job of moving through excitement because you've got time travel. And who doesn't love time travel, right? Like I'm a sucker for Back to the Future. I love those movies. Like, and this movie not only is very much like Back to the Future, but like directly references it. Like they talk about it at one point. And like the time travel stuff gives you the opportunity to upset setting for your viewer. So people watching don't know what time we're in, don't know what place we're in, don't really know what setting we're in or what we're going to find next, right? Around every corner is a mystery box or anything could happen. With that, of course, you also get like the multiverse, which gets complicated. Like I was almost expecting to see the Marvel CGI multiverse tree, like the white like tree with a bunch of strands that they got that they're putting in like every movie now to be like the multiverse. This doesn't quite do that. It's visually distinct. But you get a lot of moments of like traversal through time, which Barry does with this like running thing where he kind of goes in reverse. Not even really explained. On top of that, you get a bit of an origin stuff with how Barry got his powers. That's exciting. And of course, a big battle at the end, right? You got to have the big something at the end when General Zod returns from well, I guess arrives on this alternate multiverse Earth that Barry's on, and they have to try to team up and figure that out. I feel okay saying that because it's in the trailer, not to be spoilery, but I think we need to talk about the CGI probably because I've heard a lot of people roasting it for that.
Some of the CGI in this is atrociously bad. And it starts from the beginning. Like there's a big action sequence at the opening where the Flash has to rescue people from a falling building. He rescues some babies, and it's just like the most unconvincing thing you could ever see. It doesn't even look like a car. Like, please just do this in animation. Be fully animated, because it just looks so bad and unconvincing.
Yeah, it's funny. I was reminded during that sequence of one of the Sonic the Hedgehog movies. I think the first one. Because there's a sequence in there where Sonic has to like dodge a bunch of missiles as he's running up a mountain or something. He's running up a building, and he has to, so he like, it goes in slow-mo and he ends up jumping around on these things. But it's like so much more fun and a lot shorter. And this movie, meanwhile, the sequence is like way too long, and somehow you make Flash saving a dozen fallen babies dull, which is like hard to do. I do think it's imaginative, like in the right places. But yeah, some of the CGI is laughably bad. Just this opening run sequence, I literally laughed out loud in my theater because I couldn't believe how bad it was. I was like, oh no. And I didn't want to go into this movie ready to riff on it, right? Like, I was not ready to rip on The Flash when I walked in. I had low expectations, but I was not planning on like audibly laughing like at some of the CGI. Like too big in scope, I think. They would have to spend another $500 million like to make the CGI in this movie look awesome. But
well,
yeah,
you have to make some decisions, and one of them is like, it's cool to see the slow-mo stuff, but you should do that very, very rarely. For the most part, the Flash should just be moving fast. You should just see him moving around at super speed, saving people or, stopping the building from falling, that sort of thing. We don't need to see it in slow-mo unless you're going to do it really well, like Quicksilver, I guess, in the X-Men movies. There's like literally, it's just one scene that is phenomenal that kind of happens in each movie, and they only do it once, and that's all you need. The rest of the time, you just know he moves fast, and that's what they definitely should have done more of here. But it looks bad, and it looks bad the longer it goes. Like, there's some sequences later in the film that it's like, what are you guys doing? What did you pay for? And part of it, it's like you're animating people instead of just using the character. Like you can tell that like Michael Shannon's face is just being like put over a body double or a stunt double, and a lot of it just looks bad. Or when you're trying to like look at multiple timelines and multiverse, and it's like you could have just gotten the real actors and cut pasted whatever to make it look like a dozen different timelines, but they just try to animate all these things, and it just looks so bad in the CGI.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I love the most about the old Back to the Future movies is they're like special effects marvels, right? Like Rob Zemeckis making those features. He would go on to do Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which is widely regarded as like one of the best in practical effects, like for special effects, like before using computer animation, really. This movie tries to have that same effect, but it just goes for the computer animation. And there's a lot of scenes where like young Barry is behind old Barry, and like if you're looking, it's out of focus. If you look at him, like his face is pasted on there, man. Like it's not that deep. They didn't do any like split diopter frames or anything to like put Ezra Miller in there twice, and they didn't have him like grow his hair out over 4 months to shoot the other side. Like they just, they use wigs and CGI, and like it's fine. It's fine. Like I'm looking for those things, right? I watch a lot of movies. Like I don't think the average moviegoer is. I think the average moviegoer would have a really fun time with this, but people just seem really mid on it. Like people seem really mid on Flash, and it's not great. It's not a great comic book movie, but it's good. Like I think Flash is fine. I really do.
It leans really heavily on its gimmicks. Like I said, this feels more like a Batman movie or a team up movie than it does a Flash movie. And one thing that Lord Miller of producers of the Lego Movie and Across the Spider-Verse most recently were quoted in saying, the superhero movies can't just be about cameos and Easter eggs. Like you can't build a whole movie or a whole franchise or a whole universe on that. And they're absolutely right. And that's exactly what this movie feels like. It's like, if we just throw enough shiny objects on the screen, people will come. And it's showing that, that's not happening. You have to have a really compelling story like Across the Spider-Verse that uses the multiverse and these variants of the characters to tell a really compelling and engaging story instead of just like shiny fan service.
Yeah. I think it does a lot right, but Andy's ultimately right. Like it feels like it's in the later half of like weary, fatigued superhero movies. Like it doesn't feel particularly fresh. It doesn't feel particularly new. I think there's a lot working for it, but yeah, it feels like it should have come out like pre-COVID. This is not, I think, what people are looking for. I think they want something exciting, something different, right? Like Spider-Verse. I think Phil Lord and Chris Miller are right on the nose. That being said, like I think it does things well. It's just, I don't know. I think people are tired of it. You know, like I don't think general audiences want this. Any other thoughts on this before recommendations, Andy? I had one other thing. I want to talk about the soundtrack, but what do you got? Anything?
One thing that I had heard someone say was that this movie can't decide whether it wants to be a time travel movie or a multiverse movie, and it's a little bit of both, and kind of not doing either one super well.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I like what it does, but I'm a sucker for time travel movies. I don't know. Yeah, I was surprised at how much I liked it, but I don't. No, like any movie, it's not perfect. Andy, would you recommend? Oh, the soundtrack. Shoot, that was one other thing I wanted to say. I was just looking up who the music's by. Benjamin Wallfish. Surprisingly fun soundtrack. Like high beats per minute, moves really fast, even in the slow bits. He formerly composed Blade Runner 2049 and It and The Invisible Man and Shazam. Like lots of great work out of Benjamin Wallfish. I think The Flash is a good one. I think it's solid. I don't know why. I think a lot of those sequences when he's like running in slow motion, the music's moving way faster than he is. Like that's surprisingly inspired. That's somebody who looked at this and thought, well, I want to get creative and do something special. And I think, I don't know. I think there's something cool about the music in this movie. That's just a small aside. Andy, would you recommend? Oh, any thoughts on that? Before
just that I enjoyed like the throwback calls to the Batman '89 themes. Originally by
Danny Elfman.
Thank you.
They got that score in there for sure, baby. Like absolutely.
Yeah, which is another. A lot of this movie's kind of nostalgia bait, which like it's cool to see on screen, but like I'm not going to go back and watch it again. I'll just watch the clips on YouTube.
Yeah, at the runtime, like a few will, I think. Andy, would you recommend The Flash?
I would say only for hardcore comic book aficionados. If you're really into the comic book films and you read comic books, you'll enjoy it for what it is. There's a lot of Easter eggs in there. If you're at all having a little bit of superhero fatigue, I would say probably skip this one or save it for streaming. Maybe it's definitely not must go out and see, and it's not even, unfortunately, it's not even a big must see it on the big screen experience either. In fact, a lot of the CGI probably will look better on the smaller screen. Digitally. So kind of soft pass, I think.
Yeah, I disagree. I would say go see it in a theater if you can. I think it's a fun time. Like for a comic book script, I think it's bouncy. The idea is relatively unique. You could certainly do worse, like for comic book live action features, even with the CGI, like I think it's fun. I had a few chuckles. I would say go see Flash in a theater if you can swing it, or just wait for it to show up on HBO. Like you can already see like the HBO or the Max front page, right? With like see the Flash, like play now streaming. Like it's coming soon for sure. So we'll see. With that, we normally would be segueing into our middle segment in the show. Normally we do 2 reviews, and then we'd have one that's like a segment where we talk about new trailers, right? Upcoming things to see, or the death of cinema, something that's hurting the industry that we think is worth highlighting. But this week, we're moving right on to review number 2. It's going to be Transformers: Rise of the Beasts. So Transformers: Rise of the Beast is set in the 90s. This is a funny one for me to cover because I am not a big Transformers guy. I've seen, probably just like you or most other people, a few of them. I watched a couple of those Michael Bay features. They had Shia LaBeouf running around, and I remember they had one with Mark Wahlberg in it, and there was one with Anthony Hopkins. They've been moving around, I think, effectively. But now Transformers are going back to the past, specifically 1994, when young Anthony Ramos, playing a character named Noah Diaz, is in the middle of stealing a car to help pay for his brother's surgery. which just sounds so phony, like just saying it out loud, but it's fine. Is stealing a car to pay for his brother's surgery when suddenly he discovers that he's not actually stealing a car, but what he's stealing is a transformer, and he immediately gets swept into saving the universe and going with Optimus Prime and Bumblebee and friends to meet the Maximals, these animal-oriented transformers that don't turn into cars. They turn into like a giant gorilla or a giant eagle, and ultimately fight the bad Autobots and save the world. I again, not the biggest Transformers guy. The movie is Transformers: Rise of the Beast. Andy, what'd you think?
So it was all right. It was, I think, a lot better than the Michael Bay films. It's still a little bit, just kind of suffers from blockbuster, blockbuster virus, where it's like a big loud thing. The plot is very much, there's lots of MacGuffins. It's like, oh, there's this thing that we have to go here and get to prevent the end of the world, and then there's a big, almost like video game ending where it's like, oh, we have to first stop this while this team A stops that and team B stops this, and then and we'll have robot fights. It's very, very, like, again, nostalgia bait, because it's like the younger brother comes in and he's like, oh man, I can't beat the Super Mario Brothers game on my original Game Boy. I'm going to go watch Mighty Morphin Power Rangers with my Wu-Tang poster on the wall. It's like, we get it. It's in the 90s. But it's fine. It again, I think all these movies, they suffer from the human characters. The human characters are fine in this, but let's like, can we just have Optimus Prime be the main character for once? Or the robots just be the main characters, and have maybe the human characters be the side, because then you have to like shoehorn them in. They kind of go all over the world. The evil robots come, they fight. There's some good action sequences. There's almost too many characters, and we don't have enough screen time for everyone. The Maximals don't really get a lot of screen time, even though they're kind of the part of the big poster and the big promotional push. And funny enough, Pete Davidson's character Mirage actually is kind of the main Transformer in this one. So it's a mixed bag. Some of it works, some of it doesn't.
Pete Davidson's Transformer Mirage is the smallest one on the poster. He's all the way in the back row. Like you can barely see him if you're looking at it, but he's on there. Yeah, I think this movie is a lesser Transformers movie for sure, and there's a few reasons for that. Number one, very poor live action sequences. It's directed by Steven Caple Jr., who previously did Creed 2. Before that, he did just a couple of indies. He hasn't really stepped into like a big budget like this, and like he leaned way too hard on the CGI. Like he really lazy car sequences. The live action stuff is fine, but you don't really get a lot of it. You don't spend a lot of time with Noah, like getting to know his life and who he is. The first act moves real fast, and then you're right into Transformer stuff, and from there it's all wide shots and CGI. Like we'll put Optimus Prime in here, and we'll put this character over here, and like I think what I like the most about Michael Bay's Transformers movies is Michael Bay knows live action comes first. He's like, the explosions need to be real, and then we'll dress them up with CGI. And Steven Caple Jr., and it seems like where this franchise is headed, it leans more on like, just get the lazy wide shot, right? Use a wide angle lens, and then we'll just figure it out in post, like the Marvel approach, right? We'll do it later. We'll hire a VFX studio, and they'll make this movie for us. And that's a shame. Like Michael Bay would flip cars for his Transformers movies. In this movie, I think there's like one kind of car stunt where like a car runs half up a ramp and jumps off, and then a cop car comes behind it and rolls. That's like it. Other than that, it's like doing donuts in parking lots and then dressing up and making them look like Transformers. And like I know a lot of people who watch Transformers movies will be fine with that. It's like the Fast and Furious franchise, right? Like you don't need it to be real or anything, but for me, like somebody who doesn't spend a lot of time with these movies, that was something I really valued. Like that was an aspect of those earlier films that like really worked. And this one just is kind of lazy in that regard.
Yeah, I think there's only like one driving scene, and that's kind of where these movies excel, are the like action scenes where you're like on a highway and all the cars are kind of chasing each other. So you have, a chance for the Transformers to actually transform in and out of their car forms and shapes. And there's like one sequence when they're on a highway that's in the trailer, but outside of that, they're kind of just running around fighting like hand-to-hand combat, which is fine, but that's not what we really want to see. We want to see like car stuff. Car adjacent stuff.
Right. And like that's something Bay is super good at. Like, and yeah, you like there's a lot of you sent me a sequence after we saw this from what for Transformers movie I hadn't seen of Optimus like chasing down some dude on a highway. And yeah, like the camera is going 100 miles an hour and it's 4 inches off the concrete. And like Bay is just like swinging this thing around and blowing stuff up. And then they add CGI. Like, and that like that's what I think works best about those, but I don't want to get stuck on it. I do want to talk about performances. Anthony Ramos as Noah Diaz is fine in this movie. Like I don't have any problems with him at all. He is, I think, aging out of playing this like young up and comer. Yeah, like he's not quite in high school here. He's supposed to be like a former soldier who was enlisted and got out. So he's, I would say, early 20s, right? Like that's where he's kind of supposed to be, and he does not look like he's in his early 20s anymore. Formerly, you saw him in The Heights and Hamilton. He's great in both of those, sings and dances. So this is a bit of a departure for him, a bit more drama. Additionally, I wanted to mention Luna Lauren Velez as his mom. She's Miles Morales' mom in Spider-Verse. Yeah, I think same person, and she was on set for one day. She's at the beginning of the movie. She's at the end of the movie. And I was trying to figure out when I was watching the movie why we were moving away from New York and why we're going to like, where do they end up? Peru, yeah. And number one, that's to meet the Maximals, and two, that's so we can get out in the middle of nowhere so the Transformers can fight, right? Like you've seen you've seen the trailer, like you've seen that big one-off fight scene they got out there where there's all kinds of things going on. Of course, that can't be in New York. That'd blow up our budget. That's got to be in Peru, out in the middle of nowhere, so we can make a CGI battlefield. You know, like. That's just it. Like my eyes glaze over, man. Like I'm so like that's where the movie loses me, you know. And it's a shame. Like I think Transformers movies, you should get more invested as it goes. For me, like after the first act, I got less, you know.
Yeah, and movies like these, they really need to simplify the plots, and they always end up doing the opposite. Like there's this whole thing about there's this secret key that's the key to go home. That the Transformers are trying to find, but if the bad guys get it, then they can destroy the planet. And then like the last third, there's, like I said, it's like a video game. It's like first we need to do this, so then we can do this, so then we can do this, so then we can stop the machine, and then we can save the world. And it's a huge, it's like MacGuffin after MacGuffin instead of having like, let's develop an actual conflict here that we can like flesh out and like base our characters around. And I mean, I don't know why I want these to like be Shakespeare, but it would really help if you like, you know, let's try to develop some real conflicts of interest between parties or something. If you're not going to have like these over the top action sequences.
Yeah, I mean that's something I think like the Michael Bay laid down in those old films that like really has gotten us here, right? Has built the franchise. Like Bay treated those movies like they were super serious. He does the same thing with all of his movies, right? Ambulance is a super serious like movie from Michael Bay, and God, what's that movie with The Rock? Him and Mark Wahlberg. I don't know. They're both
Pain and Gain.
Yes, like even though they are goofy on the surface, like Bay is like these things are like biblical to him. Like he's like, I'm going to present this as straightforward as possible. And I think like that's what keeps Transformers grounded. And this feels like a cartoon. Like. I agree, by the way, like it's time to just give Optimus Prime his own movie. Even though I do think his voice actor, I don't remember his name.
Peter Cullen.
Dude, he's got to retire. Like I know he's the voice of Optimus, but like he sounds 1 billion years old. And I know Optimus is supposed to be 1 billion years old, but like dude, he sounds like Carl from Up. Like he sounds so old.
Oh my God.
Like you can hear his wheelchair squeaking in the background. Like let that man rest. All right. Like take it easy. Meanwhile,
I was gonna say Optimus Primal, voiced by Ron Perlman, sounds so much better. He's the more convincing voice. If you're looking for somebody new, like I hate to say it, but like Pete Davidson's Mirage is a fine Transformers character. Like he's snarky and young and kind of mouths off, and like I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that character has been in Transformers before in one fashion or another, but
Like, even he is more fun than like Optimus Prime, who just sounds like a billion years old, man. Like, just like stop, hang it up. You don't sound like I feel like Optimus Prime sounds in my head. It's like using what's his name, the old voice actor for Sam Fisher in the Splinter Cell games. Like, you guys gotta upgrade here. It's fine. It's fine. And I'm sure there's a lot of Transformers fans who are gonna hit me in the comments for it. But any other thoughts on this for recommendations, Andy? I don't mean to just like slam it and leave, but I do want to.
I was just thinking about some of the action. There are moments, a lot of times, like in the middle of the climax, there'll be like a very hype moment. Think of in Endgame when Captain America picks up the hammer, things like that, or when the portals open and everyone comes through. There's a couple of moments that are supposed to be like the big hype moment where something you didn't expect happens. And when they happen, you just kind of roll your eyes. Like there's several moments that are like this is it. This is like your big surprise. There's a couple of those, especially some eye-rolling stuff in some post-credit stuff that is supposed to get you excited for things to come. Yeah. And I couldn't have. My eyes almost rolled out of my skull. Like, and it's like you could argue that it's a kids movie, but a lot of this is like it's nostalgia. It's 80s nostalgia, so it is aimed at like an older audience. So I don't know, but it has done better business than both the solo Bumblebee movie and the last Transformers movie, The Last Night. So they're going to keep making these because it's, I think, a financial success for what it is.
Yeah, like, great for Transformers, right? Huge W. Any other thoughts or recommendations?
No, I think I'm ready.
Andy, would you recommend Transformers: Rise of the Beast?
I think I would say save it for streaming. It's definitely better than the last few Transformers movies we got. It's not quite as good as Bumblebee. I don't think it's not too long, which helps. I think it's right at 2 hours. There are some fun action sequences. Pete Davidson is surprisingly funny and good as his newer character, Mirage, who's the Porsche car. Some of it, like the plot's all over the place. The action isn't as cool as some of the previous films, but it's if you're interested in this, I would say save it for streaming.
I would say skip, man. Like, I know I'm not wise on Transformers movies. Like, maybe the last few have been bad, but like, I just don't think this is the best showing for this franchise. Like, I'm sure there have been better. It reminds me of like one of the middling Fast and Furious movies. Like, you could completely skip this movie and probably miss nothing for whatever's coming next. Like, it just feels really segmented. It's set in 1994. Like, I don't think there's anything in here that's like vital to the franchise going forward, unless it's the Maximals. But like, when Gorilla Ron Perlman shows up in the next Transformers movie, you're not going to need to have seen this one to get what's going on. You're fine. Transformers: Rise of the Beast, middling at best, in my humble opinion. With that, we got one more movie to get to. Like I said at the top, we don't normally do 3 movies on this podcast. It's a summer blowout. We got to talk about this one. Andy's going to take the summary. Please, Andy, take it away.
Elemental. So this is the latest release from Disney Pixar. After a year since our last film, which was the Lightyear solo film, we meet Ember very early on in Element City, which is a city of the different elements: fire, earth, wind, water. His missing heart for a Captain Planet. But heart. This is not kind of a mixed city. Element City is not really built for everyone. We see that the fire people are kind of immigrants here. They've come from the Fireland to settle in Element City, but they're not really welcome when they first come, and they have to kind of settle in more dilapidated parts of town, and very slowly over time build up their life. Ember and her family build this kind of fire store where they sell fire supplies to other fire people. Eventually, one day, the way we set up, Ember is meant to kind of take over the business from her father, but we don't really know if that's what's right for her. She eventually runs into Wade Ripple, played by Mamadou Athie, who is a water person and who immediately and works for the city, and writes her a bunch of tickets and said, "Hey, we got to shut this business down. This is not things aren't up to code." They fight, but they eventually kind of have to work together to solve problems on both sides of their family, and kind of overcome differences between like their families and cultures in Element City. Also, strangely about infrastructure weaknesses. But that's kind of our plot. Zach, what did you think?
So Elemental, I think, had a very middling trailer. And we've talked about it on the show in the past weeks. If you've been listening, the trailer for this movie does not look outstanding. It looks very flat. It looks like a generic summer kids flick. I don't think any kids are getting excited watching the trailer for Elemental. But Pixar has a tendency to kind of give you a peek into what's going on, and then you actually get into it and discover there's a whole range of emotions involved, and it'll tug on your heartstrings and make you cry in the theater, right? Doesn't always work. Sometimes they hit, sometimes they miss. And I feel like in that sense, in the way that Elemental is going to bring you to your knees and make you question the life you've led, it is not one of those Pixar movies. I don't think it lands that way. But also on the other side of that seesaw, Elemental's better than it looks in the trailers, for sure. I think the trailers for this movie were weak, and of the couple that I've seen, both of them seem to follow this kind of line that Wade and Ember are friends. Oh, they're friends, and Ember doesn't have to listen to her dad, and she can do what she wants. Isn't it great? Elements, right? Elements don't mix. Yeah, they do, Mom. It's called chemistry. Just kind of a generic approach, and it turns out it's not that at all. Elemental's surprisingly romantic. When we finished, I told Christine I didn't know this was a rom-com. And she was like, it's not a rom-com. I was like, it is, absolutely. It's got hallmark scenes of a rom-com, very much so. And also, a surprisingly poignant, statement on where we come from, right? And how we interact with others who are different than us. And it would be easy to say that it's just doing the Zootopia gag, right? I said it a lot going into this episode, that it looks just like Zootopia, and it's just a city where a bunch of elements that don't mix have to learn to interact with one another. But surprisingly, it takes a different spin in a way that I think is fresh enough that it can stand on its own. And I'm excited to talk about it. Andy, what did you think of Elemental?
Yeah, I liked it a lot more than I thought, and it's not the movie that's been advertised. The rom-com aspect is just part of it. It's really more of a kind of this immigrant story, and of this idea that as a second generation, offspring of immigrants, kind of this pressure that a lot of second generation people feel to kind of just follow in their parents' footsteps and do because of the sacrifices that came before you, even though it may not be right. Because we see that Ember doesn't really like working at the store. She's very short-tempered. She's just not good with the customers, but she feels like she doesn't have a choice. She feels like, her father worked so hard, her family worked so hard, sacrificed so much to come here, and that she feels like she kind of has to do what they envisioned for her because of their sacrifice. So it's that's a very complex thing, kind of topic to deal with. Also, this idea of, they say early on in the film, the city's not meant with fire people in mind, because the city is mostly built for the water people and the wind people and the earth people, but not fire people. So there's a very it's kind of about segregation in a lot of ways, and just kind of you can code this very much to places it reminded me of the Bronx in the 1950s and 60s, when they just decided to put a freeway through it, and it didn't matter how that affected the people. And that's kind of the situation here, where the fire town is just kind of being neglected by the city, and it's kind of falling apart because of that. So there's a lot of kind of serious subtopics running underneath this.
Yeah, it's really obvious that this is a story about people who are different, right? Our kind of group of fire people live on the on the underside of Element City. There's a really great visual of this tram that runs on this bridge over Fire City, and it's a water tram, and water dumps over the sides of it, and all the fire people have to live far away from it, and they resent it, and Ember sees it every day, and she's like, oh, stupid, completely different from me, don't care about us, right? It's like mud flying off wagon wheels. And the issue of generational, I don't want to just use the term trauma, but fundamentally, the feeling of like, well, my parents did this for me, so I have to do this for them, right? They've sacrificed for me, so I have to sacrifice for them, is surprisingly heartfelt because it comes from a place of genuine purpose. Director Peter Sohn said this is based on his life and when he was growing up and feeling like he had to honor traditions of his family, but also like wanted to chase animation and do something different and creative and get into like a different field. Like he had a lot of issues with that. And the fire folks in this movie are very Eastern. It's not really clear like what culture they're specifically based on. But you got one, Andy? You think?
Well, I think they purposely avoid it being any specific culture, and but yeah, it's kind of like an Eastern European kind of like they come to Ellis Island, they settle in what is essentially New York,
and their right, and their culture is very different, right? Like they paint their signs in different fonts, and they live in like kind of clay housing structures, and there are tons of puns in the shop, like frosted. They sell cereal called Frosted Flames, and all their food is really spicy, right? Like it's different. And meanwhile, like Wade and the water folks are like they live in Element City in high rises and penthouses, right? And they have great public transportation and don't have any problems at all, and everybody's dressed very nice, and they don't seem to want for anything. So you get a bit of classism. One of the things I really liked in the setting that I think is different from Zootopia, and I'll try to make this my last comparison to it. Not everybody's seen it, but Zootopia came out a few years ago from Disney. It's about a city full of animals. All the animals are different, and the whole big lean in that movie is predators versus prey, right? You're either a predator of other animals, or you're like a victim, right? And trying to blur that line over like who you are. This movie instead is about where you're from. Right? Like it's not about like who is a predator and who is a prey. It's about like where you've come from and like where you're going and how sometimes that can hold you back. And I love the way that in Element City, Ember is not barred from anywhere. At least currently, there's a flashback in her past where she wasn't allowed to go to a place because she was fire. No fire allowed, right? Like fire's dangerous. She can go anywhere she wants, but she's so uniquely alone. There are no fire people in Element City. Like you don't see them when she's walking in a huge crowd full of these cloud beings and these earth creatures and water people. Like there's never another fire person, and she's so uniquely alone. But she also burns brightest, right? She's the most visible because she's fire and everybody can see her. So she like puts on a hoodie and like tries to hide, and like that visual of somebody who feels so out of place in a place where technically you can go anywhere, right? Technically you're a part of this, but like you don't really feel like a part of it is really great. And like I thought that was really stellar like directing and art direction to make her feel like she's not a part of a place where she, technically is. I thought that was really good stuff.
Yeah, I think the movie does a lot of good showing and not telling. Like one of the great sequences, it kind of shows Ember and her dad growing up together in the shop, and you kind of see the dad begin to struggle with kind of the daily tasks. Like they do a thing where they crush logs to make a product, and that gets harder and harder for her dad. Or her dad starts coughing a lot, and he's like coughing soot, to just demonstrate the aging process. It's a lot of really clever things that the movie does to it does a lot of showing, not telling, which is always great to see in cinema. I wanted to talk about the animation a little bit because this is this is a $200 million film, and you see the money on screen. Like the animation for this movie not getting a lot of press or a lot of buzz, the animation's pretty stunning, and it does look incredible. Like Ember and the Flame People are constantly in just this kind of roiling motion of fire, and it's reflected through their emotions. Like Ember loses her temper a lot, and she gets like brighter. She turns purple. Element City is really impressive. You have lots of water effects everywhere. I was really impressed with the animation.
Yeah, I think one of the things worth mentioning for Pixar is how they always push the medium forward. Like a lot of people skip Lightyear, and one of the things I liked most about Lightyear is just how stellar it looks. Like their lighting effects, the way they like work with materials now is insane. Like it is so wild how good Lightyear looked, even though not that many people went and saw it. Elemental, I think, mostly gets into that space. Our individual characters, you've seen the designs, right? Like you're probably familiar, are odd and cartoony, right? They're weird, but a lot of the background stuff, a lot of the environmental work is really stellar. The way water flows in this movie looks amazing. And I don't mean Wade, the water person, right? I mean just general water, because there is a difference. Not all water is sentient in the world of Elemental. And the way water splashes and flows like looks really incredible. A lot of the general design of the world, right? Like you've got a lot of elements working amongst each other. You've got cloud people that have their own form of transportation. They use these blimps, and then the earth people like have this whole subway thing. Like the way the city comes together is really clever, especially because you don't spend that much time in it. Like most of the movie takes place in kind of the Firetown area, which is just outside of the city or really kind of under it. And I think that's really clever. Like it doesn't try to do the Zootopia angle where it's like, hey, we're going to show everybody doing their thing. And I do think that may feel a little truncated, honestly. For 90 minutes, the movie moves really fast, like very efficient pacing. It's so much so that I think they may have had some issues in post-production. And I think somebody from Disney might have been like, tighten this up. This movie's 20 minutes too long. You know, make it shorter, make it faster, abbreviate this scene, figure out a reason for Wade to be here when it doesn't really make sense. Some of the character motivations, like, just seem odd and out of place. I don't want to get into it without talking spoilers, but overall, like for a kids flick, like I think it does a fine job. The problem is like I don't think it's a very good kids movie. I think it's more of like a romance. That's kind of the A plot for me, right? Or Andy, do you think it's more about Element City and infrastructure and being different?
I mean, to me, the Ember's dilemma with her kind of the immigrant story was the main plot, and then the romance with Wade is kind of the B plot more for me. But you know, one of the things that Pixar was known for was making movies for kids that were still very engaging for adults, and this doesn't quite do that to the same extent as things like Toy Story or The Incredibles or Finding Nemo, kind of those earlier Pixar films. But I mean, that's a really high bar to me. But I think this is a really good entry still, and I mean, I think this is probably the best of their last five or six releases.
Yeah, I don't think I quite agree with that. I put Turning Red on my top 10 like the other year, man. Like I thought Turning Red was really stellar, and I really enjoyed Soul as well. I know people that like Luca. Like I think Pixar is doing this high concept work that is really clever, but like it just doesn't bring in numbers like their earlier stuff did, or their sequel stuff, which seems to be where they're headed after Elemental. I know there's Elio that we had a trailer for. It's their next feature. And I know Bob Iger said they're doing Toy Story 5, by God. So Tom Hanks, dust off your cowboy boots, right? Like you're turning up once again. I do want to talk about the short that ran in front of this real quick. The short that runs in front of this is called Carl's Date. It's about Carl from Up, the Pixar movie. He is having a date. First one since Ellie passed away, God rest her soul, and him and his dog Doug have to get ready and prepare for him to go out and do this big thing as an old guy who shouldn't be afraid of dates. Andy, I have a hot take on this, but I just wanted to see your general impressions before I drop in with it.
So, these shorts can range from like, I mean, they will make you cry to you'll fall asleep. And this was kind of on you might fall asleep in the middle of it. There were people in my screening that thought they were in the wrong movie, like they didn't realize they were still in a Pixar movie, because it wasn't apparent that this was like a short. That this was, you're supposed to see this. It's a little long. I think it's like 7 minutes, which feels long for a short. I mean, it was fine. It just it seemed really disjointed. Like I said, a lot of people didn't know what's going on. If you haven't seen Up, it kind of doesn't make a lot of sense. So I mean, I thought it was fine, but I would have rather seen something more original.
There's so many great Pixar shorts, right? Like too many to just quickly list on the show. There's so many films where something clever and original, like Boundin' or Jerry's Game or that snowman run that runs in front of Finding Nemo, like Lifted, Presto in front of Wall-E. Like I was talking about it after we watched the movie just last night, and I think shorts are a great idea for Pixar and for Disney because nobody else does them anymore. They're unique. They feel cinematic. They make it feel like going to the theater for a Disney movie is different than every other movie because not only are you getting trailers, but you're getting a different slice of art. It helps kind of prep you. It helps you get ready for the water when you're diving into the movie proper. Like and we live in a time of short form content. Like I think shorts is a great idea. They should keep doing it. Keep that animation going. Share them online. Keep making shorts. That being said, nobody's going to say this is their favorite short. Like it is forgettable. It takes place almost entirely inside a house in like 3 rooms with some quick montage stuff. Like Carl's date is bad, dude. And it feels like it's just advertising for this like series of shorts they're doing on Disney Plus for Up. Like this is kind of the Orient. And it's like, go to Disney Plus and check out our other Up content, and it's like huge miss. I was really excited to see a short in front of this. This is not the short you guys should have run. Like this one's weak. I mean, like just dude, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I did want to mention that before we got to final thoughts. And Andy, anything else for recommendations on Elemental?
I think I'm ready.
Andy, would you recommend Elemental?
Yeah, I would. I really enjoyed it, and I did not expect to. Like I said, I wasn't really excited by any of the trailers we'd seen or the things I heard, but it turned out to be a really pleasant surprise and surprisingly deep story about struggles of first and second generation immigrants to new places, along with just fitting in, meeting new people, meeting people that are different. And the animation looks really amazing. I was really surprised by this, so I would say highly recommend.
I'd say recommend if you're interested. Like if you like Pixar and you want to support animation and you want to, go check out something different, then yeah, I'd say go see this. But like, it's a tough recommend coming just a couple weeks off of Spider-Verse, like an animated feature that is like mind-bogglingly good, like, and this is a completely different style of animation. It's much more traditional, but Elemental surprised me. Like I was surprised at what it brought to the table and how sincere it ends up being. I don't think it's Pixar's best. It's certainly not their worst. Like, yeah, I'd say go see Elemental if you can swing it. Otherwise, it'll be on Disney Plus in like 90 days. So you can just hang out. Yeah.
Or maybe next month.
I know. What a week at the movies, Andy. 3 episodes, a little long on the runtime, but I think we're doing okay. What are we watching next week?
Yeah, it's been like I said, huge number of releases in the last just 3 weeks. It will start to slow down. Next week, we are seeing the wide release of Asteroid City, which is Wes Anderson's new film. We've heard a lot of great things. It had a good initial showing in New York and LA, so we're going to be catching that. We're also going to be taking a look at Extraction 2, the Netflix action film, which came out last week on June 16th. So we're going to be taking a look at that. We reviewed the first one several years ago. And some other just FYI releases, the indie film, the Korean film Past Lives, that I've heard a lot of buzz about, will be releasing wider in theaters this Friday. Catch that if you're interested. And then not next week, but the week after, we have, over the 4th of July weekend, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny to look forward to over the long 4th of July weekend. So we'll see how that is in a couple of weeks.
I'm definitely going to be traveling the 4th of July week, so we won't have an episode that week, but I will definitely think we should do Indiana Jones and then like something else. That'll be a good one to come back from. Probably. Yeah, probably Indiana Jones and Mission Impossible. God, that's going to be a blowout episode. But if you enjoyed the episode today, or maybe you liked the previous episode you've done, or maybe you want to keep up with what we're doing next, the best way to keep up with your boys here at Offscript is subscribe to the show. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Subscribe on YouTube. Incredible things going on with the Offscript YouTube page. Wild stuff. I never imagined what we'd be doing over there is what's going on over there. Go check out the YouTube page. That's what I'm saying. We're also on Facebook, where we live stream the show every Tuesday, right around 5 o'clock CST. If you're available, come check it out. Leave a comment. We will talk about it on the episode. We're on Instagram. We're on Twitter. We got a website where we're posting clips all the time, offscriptfilmreview.com. And if you want to email us directly for correspondence, get direct to the heart of what we're doing, you can email us at mail@offscriptfilmreview.com. I think that covers just about everything. Good Lord. Episode 218 in the bag. I don't believe it. Wow.
Still running. Running hot.
Summer box office blowout. Man, here we are. From all of us at Off Script, the home of both cinema, I'm Zach Lewis.
And I'm Dr. Draper.
Thanks for watching.